What's going on, good people? It's your main man, Joe Fleetwood, the hustler, and welcome to the Joe Fleetwood podcast. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, make sure you go to joefleetwood.net and follow all of my social media links. Go ahead and head over to YouTube. Go ahead and like this video and also subscribe to my channel, as that would be greatly appreciated and help me boost the channel. While you're on my website, make sure you check out the Joe Fleetwood merchandise shop. Go ahead and get you a couple of hats, some shirts, and stuff like that. And while you're over there, if you are a fan of energy drinks, there's a link on there for Dubby Jitter-Free Energy Drink. Now, you can get the drink in a can, you can get it in a tub, or you can get the drink package like I have here, which is how I choose to drink them. I also have the cans, but today I'm doing the energy drink packets. So make sure you check that out. Also, you can use the promo code Joe Fleetwood and get 10% off your purchase over at Dubby. Like I said, the link is on the home page of joefleetwood.net. So make sure you get over there, do your thing, and it's greatly appreciated. You know what I'm talking about? So without any further ado, let's get into today's podcast. And today's topic is going to be the history of hip hop and pretty much how it came about. And what kind of sparked this show was because I was constantly hearing the younger generation use this word plant when it came to Sexyy Red and Drake. Now, as I get into the history of hip hop and the dangers that came along with crossing over, you understand that when they call someone a plant, they're actually referring to probably about 80% of the rappers in the business today. Now, I know you're saying that doesn't make sense, but when you understand what the agenda was that was pushed up, I just shouldn't even say pushed upon hip hop, that was infiltrated into the game, then you'll understand why I say about 80% of the rappers today are basically plants. So let's hop right into it. Now, when it comes to hip hop, of course, we all know it's probably one of the most influential forms of music today, because you can find remnants of it in R&B, soul, pop, alternative rock, and in some cases, I've even heard some hip hop lyrics in country music. Now, hip hop has always been a music that was created out of struggle and nothingness, especially when you understand how DJs came about and the art of break beats and using records in order to create a beat. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, when did the talent level of being able to rhyme over beats begin to deteriorate? How did the music go from everybody wanting to be the best lyricist in the game to now only wanting basic rhyme schemes and catchy beats? Before we can get into the meat and potatoes of this, I'm going to address this point, because the OGs who listen to this, you have to understand that the older hip hop artists have to take some accountability for the state that hip hop is in today. You can only blame the younger generation so much, because the older guys took their hands off of it. And I'll get into that too. But the younger generation, they need to understand that the type of music that they are creating is a detriment to the art form itself, but it's also a detriment to our community and culture. And we're going to get into that also. Now, to fully grasp what I'm saying, you would need to understand a little bit of the history of hip hop, and then also the crossover controversy that grew within it. Because when you hear the younger generation use the word plant, like I said, they're not wrong. But based off the logic of what I know, and I just have I have the ability to understand it because I had the opportunity to watch rap grow. The younger generation did not have that opportunity. So, but based off of that logic, you know what I mean? Like I said, probably about 80% of the game, of the rappers in the game, you could consider as plants. But that's only because the mechanism that is used to control popularity and placement is out of our hands. We no longer get the opportunity to decide what's dope and what's not. Like we sold off the control that we had within the culture. We sold that off. And that was the danger of crossover. So a lot of the, you know, that's like myself growing up when hip hop was in its infant stages. I, I used to hear crossover all the time, but I never quite understood what it meant and why rappers was kind of like scared of it. So, but you know, after I got older, did my research, here we are today. Now, the first industry breaker in hip hop was cut in 1979 by the Sugar Hill Gang called Rapper's Delight. Shortly after that, MTV aired what would be considered the first rap song on music TV, the first rap video. And it was actually done by a lady by the name of Blondie, and the name of the song was called Rapture. Now, by the name, you can guess you could guess that this was a white woman that actually who actually had this video. So for the art form to be created in the projects in the Bronx, and the first video to be represented by Blondie, this is probably the first case where you can see where the mechanism controlling the launch and the narrative and the space in which the music resides. Because when you control all of those things, you get to determine how it's presented, and you get to shape and form the narrative. Later on, rap got its own channel, its video music channel, which was a video music box that was hosted by Fab Five Freddy, who was actually in Blondie's video. Now, Blondie, absolutely no disrespect to Blondie. Blondie was actually an innovator. She actually loved everything about hip hop. She loved DJing. And when she met Fab Five Freddy, she was like, hey, I want to do something with these guys, and I want to, bring this music to the world because it's all creative. So she was actually an innovator in that. Once again, like I said, it took that in order for hip hop in order to get some notoriety. So by no means is this a knock to Blondie. So, like I said, and take note of Video Music Box because it is going to come up later on, and as well as Fab Five Freddy, because he is also a pillar in the hip hop community when it comes to the history of it. For me, my introduction to rap, I got into it when I first saw groups like Whodini, Run DMC, EPMD, NWA, and then you had artists like Slick Rick, Big Daddy Kane, and also Dana Dane. And a lot of you may not be familiar with Dana Dane, but make sure you go check him out. He had this song called Send the Fella Dana Dane, which was one of my favorites growing up. Now, when it came to Run DMC, they were pretty much ahead of their time. Let me take that back. I don't want to say they were ahead of their time, but Run DMC was probably the first hip hop group to actually cross over. And I don't know enough about the history of it to know what pushed the agenda for it to happen. I don't know if Run DMC went to Aerosmith with the idea, and that's something I'll find out later on. But this is the first time myself seeing hip hop crossing over into another branch of music. Because when they did Walk This Way with Aerosmith, the video itself was larger than life. When you looked at the stage and them performing at the concert, I've never been to a concert to where I've seen a crowd that packed. It was only something in a video on TV. So when they did that song, that was the first crossover song. And for those of you who are listening, you don't understand what crossover is. It's basically when you leave the hardcore culture of rap and you begin to change up the music in order to appeal to another genre or other fans outside of true hip hop fans. So that's crossing over. The rappers that I just told you about, like I say, we all know where rap started from, but the music that was coming out of New York had a very conscious, Afrocentric, uplifting feel to it. It was primed in schooling us on how the world really is, and also our key to liberation and staying true to ourselves and the culture. And you can see this in groups like Public Enemy, African Bambaataa, Poor Righteous Teachers, De La Soul, Queen Latifah. That's just to name a few. MC Lyte. when it came to, there was a healthy balance of self-awareness, talent, and just the raw appeal. So knowing that, when did it actually change? When did hip hop change into this, I guess you could say, this action filled narrative with violence, guns, drugs, and all of that? Now, answer to that question is Special Ed. He was also one of those rappers that came out back then. He had something to say about the actual point in which hip hop actually made that drastic change from being, uplifting, Afrocentric, primed and schooling us. He actually talks about the change that he saw and the moment hip hop went down a different path. So this is an interview with Special Ed on Drink Champs. Check it out.
Oh, Yo MTV Raps.
Video Music Box,
Ralph
man.
McDaniels
Uncle
got that.
Ralph,
Yes.
Brooklyn.
Yes.
Once again. But besides
Ralph is from Queens now.
Ralph from Brooklyn to me. Ralph, you from Brooklyn. But Uncle Ralph, because he's still at it. He's still going. Matter of fact, I had Ralph host the Coney Island show, and Ralph is hosting in Harlem with me. I always incorporate Ralph. He always show me love. He showed me more love than most, you feel me, throughout my entire career, period. So Uncle Ralph all day. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Ed Lover, Dr. Dre, I love y'all too, but Ralph is my OG, man. That's Unc, yeah.
Big Fat Five Ready as well.
Yeah.
NWA or Wu-Tang Clan?
Wu-Tang.
Okay.
Wu-Tang is for the kids.
Wu-Tang
now,
for
you
the
know what?
children.
Besides that, man, Wu-Tang was dropping knowledge and positivity. NWA brought the age of destruction. Damn. Jesus. NWA brought the age of destruction to our children and our culture.
Wow.
Period. Hey, I respect all of them as men.
Right.
But as the art form, and you want me to speak on the art form, I'm going to tell you what it is. That's where it started.
Wow.
That's where the agenda started, and that's where the destruction began.
Of gangster rap, you would give that to them, or was it Ice-T?
Well, Ice-T, yeah, Ice-T did that. I ain't say they started gangster rap, but what happened was when the president sent them that letter, they went ham with that shit.
Right.
And they had more of a presence. Ice-T did his numbers back. He did his thing. That's my OG too, Ice-T. But NWA ran away with it in such a way where it was like, for real?
Word.
That's all we gonna do?
Yeah.
It was genius for them, and they made millions of dollars off of it, but look at what it caused.
They
feel
said
me?
fuck the police early.
Yeah. We always saying fuck the police, but they said it on record.
On record.
Absolutely. For the record. And I respect them for that too.
But
So in order to put what he was saying into context, and it sounded a lot harsher than what he was actually saying. And I'm pretty sure most people have seen Straight Outta Compton. So let me put it to you this way. NWA was simply shedding light on a situation and things that were going on in their day-to-day lives in LA. The music business or the music industry saw how this controversy transitioned into millions of dollars for the label and anyone that was connected to it. So from NWA's point of view, they were just speaking about a situation or situations that they see all the time. They were speaking about police brutality in LA. Now, most recently on social media, there is a video circulation about a LAPD cop was punched a black man who was handcuffed already. Now, of course, the last updates I seen that the officer was released from duty without pay pending investigation. But if it's going on for NWA to bring it to light during a time where there were no camera phones and to do that, Imagine how much brutality was going on that they actually saw that nobody had phones to catch. While NWA was doing something positive, the music industry, the corporate side, the business side of the music industry, they only saw dollar signs and had to figure out a way in order to keep that train going. What the music business began to do, like once they educated themselves on how to keep that money train going, it was all gas, no brakes at that point. Now, as rap progressed, you always had to have a healthy balance of the consciousness and then also the realness and the grit and the raw street version of hip hop. There was always a balance there. And when it came, it shared the airwaves. There was no, like, you could hear a song from NWA, but then you could also hear a song from De La Soul, Poor Righteous Teachers, the Brand Nubians, you name it. Tupac, who else was coming out during that time? But you get my point. You would always have a balance on the radio. So as the West Coast began to outpace the Midwest and the East Coast, labels began looking for more edgy artists, and they began to give them a larger budget. Now, by them giving the more edgy artists the bulk of the budget, you started to hear them on the radio a lot less. And around this time, hip hop was moving to a more corporate stance to the business side, and other artists immediately jumped on. This is when the word crossover started being thrown around in the hip hop business. So you're talking about the late 80s, early 90s, because they noticed how these labels were starting to influence music. A lot of this started with companies like Universal starting to buy up record labels, Sony starting to buy up record labels. So in 1992, a group called EPMD, who I mentioned before, had this song called The Crossover. Now, for me, I was like, okay, cool. So I keep hearing everybody talk about crossover this, crossover that. And I'm just not understanding what the big deal is, right? And because I don't know, I'm like, all right, well, cool. Now, I finally get the opportunity to kind of like listen to the song and see if they tell me anything about, what's the issue with crossing over? Why do rappers have a problem with it? So when the song came out in 1992, it was on their album Business Never Personal, and the song explained the entire game plan by companies like Sony and Universal and how they began to corrupt the business and just the art form of hip hop itself and what it was doing to the culture. Now, I'm only going to play one verse of it because I don't want to. And if you want to hear it, you can just go look it up yourself. EPMD. It's on the album Business Never Personal, like I said, and the song is Crossover. So let's just hop right into the video.
Sing for the crossover. Crossover. The rap era's out of control, brother selling his soul to going, gone. Another rapper soul to pop in R&B, not the MD. I'm strictly hip hop. I stick to kick free, funk mode. Yeah, kid, that's how the squad rolls. I know your head is bobbing, cause the neck knows. Like other rappers, putting on their fans, they ill trying to chill, saying damn, it'll be great to sell a mill. That's when the mind switch to the pop tip. You're gonna be large. Yeah, right, that's what the company kicks. Forget the black crowd, you're whack now. In a suit, front and black, looking mad foul. I speak for the hardcore, I'm out of here, catch me chilling on my next tour. From the US to the White Cliffs of Dover. Strictly underground funk, keep the crossover.
Now, the push to remove these big industry or these corporate types out of hip hop, it didn't just stop with EPMD. Even some of the more socially conscious groups and artists begin to talk about the crossover and how they saw how artists were being manipulated by these big companies because they had the money, right? And money is a motivation for anybody who's struggling in order to just conform to whatever it is, the business or the industry wants. But you had groups like the Roots. The Roots dropped a song, and this is probably one of my favorite songs by the Roots, called "What They Do." And they also talked about the art form starting to deteriorate. They talked about how these companies were manipulating artists, and then also how they were barely paying the artists, because you constantly hear everybody was getting a bad deal. But to them, it was just the nature of the business. Like, nobody gets a good first deal. So by them using that, they felt they were justified in paying you peanuts and just giving you a messed up deal. Now, by the time the 2000s had hit, it was already too late. Like I said, Universal and Sony had already bought out most of the black-owned record labels, and they were changing the formula in hip-hop and how it was popularized. When you can gain more of a broader fan base by making music that appealed to different artists or a different audience, record labels noticed that melodies and catchy hooks would be the difference. So once again, here's a pivotal point in hip hop where you can see, you would use this as a case study and you'd be like, all right, cool, that makes sense. Now, when Jay-Z dropped Hard Knock Life in 1998, they knew that this was a part of the formula, but not the entire blueprint. Jay-Z and Dame Dash, to be, of course, to be versed in music and used as pawns, they couldn't do that. Like, it just wasn't going to happen because Jay-Z and Dame Dash owned their own destiny. But that album would be considered part of the blueprint that other companies would use, because sampling after Jay-Z dropped that, it's like every other producer was finding some song to sample, and they were the first ones to do it. So he also got a Grammy for it. So when you look at the way music was starting to shift, people who were business savvy started to see this and were constantly having to fight the system in order to keep hip hop true to itself. So around 2009, 2010, they would take the most popular artists at that time and try to push a carbon copy, right, to take the youth, which was perfect timing because in 2006, Nas had dropped Hip Hop Is Dead. Now, remember, I told you some of the OGs have to take accountability, the state that hip hop is in right now, because when that whole Hip Hop Is Dead thing started being pushed, a bunch of the top rappers, they took their hands out of the game. There was no more, helping younger artists, mentoring younger artists. They just simply gave up. At that point, the machine ate the youth. So you got whatever they felt was pushing their narrative. But there was also other agenda attached to that. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And that agenda is happened like back in 1967. And I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about shortly. So yeah, in 2006, he dropped the Hip Hop Is Dead album. Everyone's seeing the detriment of the music. Most of the culture began to be sold off. And what I mean by that, a lot of these record companies, like Def Jam was bought out, I believe, by Sony. Other, companies were bought out, like Loud Music was bought out. I think Columbia was bought out. So all of these, music labels that kind of looked out for the true music and, where we had a voice, they were all getting bought out by these larger companies. So also, you could also see the carbon copies, because at one point in time, everybody either sounded like Lil Wayne or T-Pain. Everybody. So basically, once one hits, The labels are like, okay, yeah, we need to make a song like this. We need to make a song like this. I need you to sound more like this person. That's pretty much what you were getting. Now, to kind of bring it around full circle, I'm going to play another video. Now, earlier you heard me mention Poor Righteous Teachers. And Wise Intelligence from Poor Righteous Teachers. He was at a video, hip hop summit, excuse me. He was at a hip hop summit and he was talking about the state of hip hop. But it's very important to, like I said, pay attention to the message. Now, I'll go ahead and put a link to where you can see the entire portion of what he had to say. But I'm only going to give you this snippet because it's part of the interview that proves my point towards how the industry was moving between 2006, 2009, 2010.
Just like the brother, I believe it was JT, the bigger figure, who said that the label executives came to him and said, yo, brother, we need you talking about guns and whores. Right. You know what I mean?
That's right.
That happens. I've been in those meetings with management and had to ask me, is what you're saying really what you believe so that we'll know how to market you properly? You know what I mean? This happens. Young Buck on his album, he has a song on his album that talks about police terrorism. The label said absolutely not. Jimmy Iovine said absolutely not. You cannot put that record on the album because it might create an atmosphere that might put police officers' lives in danger.
Right.
So they took the record off, but they let him keep the other 14 songs on the album that talked about killing black youth. So this is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a circumstance or consequence of history. You know what I mean? The environment that we're embedded in puts us in a situation where we feel we have to maneuver and play the game and water our message down. You know what I mean? But no, what happened was they intentionally shifted the paradigm to get us exactly where we are right now.
So the paradigm shift in which he's talking about was what I said I was going to bring up later on, and why he said that we're in the position exactly where they wanted us. Now, in 1967, there was a report called the Kerner Report. And like I said, I'll put the link in the description, and you can actually go watch the full video, and then you can also look up the Kerner Report. I'll add it in the show notes itself. But during this time frame, there were riots in Detroit. And the government put together this group, and they came up with this report called the Kerner Report, trying to understand why there was so much civil unrest within the black culture and community. Basically, in this report, it stated that due to the racism, extreme policing, and the denial of suitable homes, was part of the reason for the unrest, and it was shedding a light on the U.S. as a whole. But one of the bigger and more detrimental points to what he was talking about and hip-hop as a whole, you would have to know more about the history of the U.S. and the black community in general. So in 1967, it was the Detroit riots. So in this report, they were saying, hey, what is causing this to happen? Basically, when you had a unified black culture, one that was sustained in self-pride and knowledge, anytime the system treated them unfairly or unjust, they were going to create an uprising. So as you look at that report, and then you look at situations in the U.S. as time progressed, you'll understand that that Kerner Report was the first iteration of understanding how to manipulate the community. Because like I said, when the black culture has the knowledge, the self-pride, and the understanding, they begin to revolt more. So how do you stop that? So first riot I could remember was was the Rodney King beatings. Now the Rodney King beating is a prime example of what happens when the pride is still there and the music supports that. This is around the time that you still had the balance, right? You still had the balance of hardcore music, and you had the balance of the conscious music that was going on at that time. So when it happened to Rodney King, and I'm pretty sure everybody who's into music seen the Straight Outta Compton video where they was showing the Rodney King beating and all that stuff, you got your civil unrest. Sean Bell, the shooting by a plainclothes police officer. Sean Bell was shot 50 times. Nothing happened. And the reason nothing happened is during that time frame, and let me get the exact time frame that Sean Bell was actually killed. Sean Bell was an unarmed black man who was gunned down by a plainclothes police officer, and he was shot 50 times. And it was 2006. So like I said, you can see the clues are all there, and it's not even really clues, but if you just pay attention, you can see everything for what it is and when the shift happened and the actual point in which hip hop started to have its downfall and got away from the truthness of the culture. You could actually see it. So in conclusion, I believe that it's a stretch to call Drake a plant. And I say that because Drake himself is a great talent. He has the ability to rap. He has the ability to sing. Now, if your argument is the way he has handled himself and carried himself within hip hop, yes, I would say some of that stuff may be considered as questionable. And if that has caused you to no longer like Drake, I completely respect that. But to simply call him a plant, I think that's out of line. Because he actually is a true talent, and you can tell that from the first album. As far as Sexyy Red, she's a product of the industry and where it is today. But the reason I can say that is because I just told you what the agenda is and how artists like Sexyy Red are where they at today. Because lyrically, you cannot tell me that Sexyy Red is a better lyricist than Nicki Minaj or Lady London. And it's not fair to throw Nicki Minaj in there, but I'll say Lady London. It is fair to throw Lady London in there, but you can't tell me that there's even, like, they're on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to creativity and the ability to rap. They're on two totally separate ends of the spectrum. But because one promotes a different type of music that is surrounded in education, being gifted, lyricism, and one just promotes all the things that we glorify but are also negative in life. I get it. If you want to have a good time, it is great music to listen to. But I think the problem is where that becomes the only thing that is available for our youth to listen to, and they don't have any other options. Because unless you are looking for Lady London and somebody is pushing and promoting her, or a major company is doing that, you probably won't find her. And she should definitely be bigger than what she is right now. So shout out to Lady London. So that's my take on Sexyy Red. You can't have nothing but, you know what I mean, reverence for Sexyy Red. Like I said, she's just a product of her environment, and she's a product of what rap is today. But if you ask the person between 18 and 28 who generally listen to music, they will tell you that lyricism or lyrical artists just don't make good music. Which the same rapper or the same person that you ask that to will tell you that Lil Wayne and Drake are one of the top rappers of all times, and then they'll throw, let's see, OJ the Juice Man in there right along with him. That don't make sense. It doesn't at all. I mean, you got your big three, of course, and you know, Kendrick may disagree, but you got K. J. Cole, Drake, right? Now, you might use them and saying, hey, oh well, they have it. They're big. What's the difference? Well, the difference is that they have DNA of the individuals who basically created hip hop, right? So you got K. Dot, came up under Dr. Dre in the game. You know what I mean? He has ties to them. J. Cole, Drake, Lil Wayne, they've all had a push from Jay-Z. So when you have, the giants giving you that backing, the industry, the machine can't stop you because they understand the machine and they can make moves that the machine can't touch. So yeah, man, that's my take, man. If you really look at the state of hip hop and how it got to be where it is, and the controlling pieces, hey man, we got what we got, and if we want to take it back, we're gonna need the people with the money, the old school artists, new school artists. We're gonna need everybody come together and make it happen. You know what I mean? That's the only way hip hop is going to get back to its root. Because without that, it's going to be a dying culture, and it is going to continue to be a detriment to the black community. It's going to be a dying art form, and it's only going to get worse. So that's it, man. I appreciate y'all for stopping by and listening. Once again, make sure you go to joefleetwood.net. Click all my. Make sure you go to joefleetwood.net. Follow all my social media links. Go ahead and head over to YouTube. Subscribe. Like the videos. Check out all my other videos as well. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next show. Joe Fleetwood signing out. Peace.